If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
And we're back. Welcome, guys, to the Survival Dispatch podcast and show for tonight. Tonight, we have a really, really awesome show planned for you. And without further ado, I am going to kind of give a background on our guest tonight. Many of you will know him because there have been movies actually made about this man and what he went through on 9/11. This is Will Jimeno. And I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. But he is a retired Port Authority police officer, a 9/11 survivor, and a powerful voice for resilience, faith, and courage under fire. His life forever changed on September 11th, 2001, when he was buried alive in the rubble of the World Trade Center after the collapse of the South Tower. What followed was the most dramatic survival in modern history, one of the most dramatic survival stories in American history. This is a story that all of us who are at least 30 years old can relate to, because everybody kind of knows. It's kind of like if you talk to your great-grandfather or your grandfather about Pearl Harbor, everybody remembers exactly where they were, or the day that President Kennedy was shot. Everyone knows exactly where they were and what was going on. I myself know it was a changing moment in my life as well, because 3 days later I joined the military to fight in the global war on terrorism. So everybody really knows what happened. But while we were watching this on TV, Will was living this in real time. And so we're going to bring him in without further ado and talk to him. This is going to be a very exciting episode, so stick with us. Hey, Will, how are you tonight, brother?
Hey, John, thanks for having me. And you came close. It's Jimeno.
Jimeno,
so
okay.
I gotta tell people, it's like a church hymn, him and Eno.
Yeah.
Eno,
okay.
So, but thanks for having me. And I just want to say, first off, thank you to you and every GWAP vet out there who, picked up the flag after 9/11 and went to fight for all of us, for America. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for those kind words. I did nothing special. I worked on planes, but it was still an honor to serve. And many answered the call that day or in the days following that. So I want to get into just a brief history of who is Will Jimeno, who is the man behind all of the stories, and obviously you've had some Hollywood movies made about you. So I want to talk about your history and how you ended up with the Port Authority Police, and then we'll get right into the meat of the story.
Well, yeah, my name is Will Jimeno, and I'm a retired Port Authority police detective with the Port Authority Police from New York and New Jersey. But my story, like everybody's story, starts somewhere. And for mine, it started in Colombia, South America, in a small town called Barranquilla. I always say that people don't know where that is. They know Shakira and they know Sofia Vergara. They're the better looking versions of Colombia from Barranquilla than I am. But I was born there. My parents brought me to the United States when I was 2. My parents came here legally as immigrants. My dad came in 1969, was a welder. He worked for a year, then brought my mom and myself here, and we landed in Hackensack, New Jersey, 12 miles outside New York City. So I remember, I was a young child, but, you could see the city skyline. So I grew up in the shadow of New York City.
Yep.
And grew up in Hackensack. Had a baby little sister named Karen 4 years later after we arrived. And basically my mom and my dad wanted to come here for whatever immigrant comes here, for the American dream. And one of the things my mom instilled in me was that we were going to fly the American flag. We're going to learn English. And we're going to bring our good attributes as immigrants here, because she says that's what makes the United States a strong country. We're a melting pot.
Yep.
So we're going to bring our heritage here, but we're going to be Americans. And 3 things that she instilled in me were faith, hope, and love. Where being Hispanic, being Latino, we're Catholic. Religion plays a huge part in our lives, and little did I know how great of an impact it was going to play for me, on 9/11. But I grew up like that. Went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade. Was a typical kid. I was very athletic. We played soccer, did karate. And then it was time to go to the college, and I decided to join the U.S. Navy. So I served 4 years in the U.S. Navy on the USS Tripoli LPH-10. Finished my enlistment in 1990, and then started my pursuit to become a police officer here in New Jersey, where at the time it was very sought after, good paying jobs. Took me a long time, took me 6 years to become a police officer. In that time, I met my beautiful wife, Allison, had a little girl named Bianca, and then finally got on the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey. And it's a very sought after position because you're police officers in 2 states. And I was blessed to become a cop there. And then unfortunately, the events of 9/11 took a toll on my life, my family's life, and America, so I'm blessed to be here today.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I love what you said about, coming to America to become an American and be a part of this great country that we all love, and understand what patriotism is to Americans, and that we are a melting pot, that we bring rich histories and we blend them together into this beautiful experiment that is America. And it's amazing. So what was the driving force behind you wanting to do, and what was the driving force for you to want to become a Port Authority police officer? And what is, for those that don't know, not all of us live in big cities where we have all these different police or law enforcement branches. What does Port Authority Police Department, what do they do, for those that don't understand?
Well, I'll go back to your first question, is what motivated me. And basically, I'll be honest with you, I think it was really my mother. My mom was always a person that helped people. And I always just felt like I wanted to be part of the community, to give back. But what I think really motivated me was, believe it or not, I think I was like 9, and I fell down the stairs and I knocked myself out. And my mom ended up calling the Hackensack Police Department. And the town I grew up in, Hackensack, at the time, they were very paramilitary. They looked like New Jersey State Troopers. If you ever look up what a New Jersey State Trooper looks like, that's what a Hackensack police officer looked like. They were very, paramilitary. And when I woke up, there was this tall Italian-looking cop there, hat on, always had his cover on, had the belt coming across. And I just remember looking up and thinking, man, this is like Superman here, And I just remember from that moment on, I'm like, that's what I want to be. I want to be a police officer. I want to be able to help people. And then as time progressed, I got to meet some of the Hackensack cops growing up, and they really had a positive impact in my life. At the time, I think we had this one cop, Ralph, and this is back in the old days. They carried 38s, and it was days that they can probably tune you up, and your parents weren't going to question it, because if you were messing with the cops, you got up, you probably deserved it. But this was a cop that would take the time to talk to us. We were like in little gangs, silly stuff, but he always pointed out, like, hey, you're being dumb. You're wasting your time doing this stupid stuff, And I just admired the community policing that he did when community policing wasn't even around. It was just him taking the time to talk to us. And it didn't matter if you were Black, Hispanic, or white, because Hackensack was a melting pot. He treated us like men. He talked to us like men, and that had an impact on me. So that was really my motivation to become a police officer. And going into the military, I knew that after my service, that's what I wanted to do. And again, the Port Authority Police, to your point of what we are, we're the 26th largest police department in the country. We're a bi-state agency. So what we do is we protect and all the facilities that the Port Authority, which is a entity of commerce, really, so we own 9 different commands we have. And so what we protect and serve are all the 3 major airports in the New York, New Jersey area. So we have LaGuardia, Newark, Kennedy. We have Teterboro with a smaller airport. We have the bridges and tunnels. We have the George Washington Bridge. We have the Goethals Bridge. We have the Lincoln Tunnel, the Holland Tunnel, the PATH trains, which is the Port Authority Trans Hudson that goes from New Jersey to New York. We have Port Newark. We have the bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan, which is the largest bus terminal in the country and the busiest in the world. And then we have the World Trade Center. We have 9 different commands, and those commands are serviced and protected by our department, the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey. And as Port Authority officers, we're not only trained in law enforcement, but we're also trained in being first responders as far as firefighting. So if a plane goes down, those are the first people out there with the trucks as the Port Authority Police. We're trained in also medical aid. So we're at all of our facilities. What sets the Port Authority Police apart from our counterpart, the NYPD, which we work with on the New York side, and all the municipalities on the New Jersey side, is that we do the same jobs as they. But the thing is that the Port Authority, and this is something we learned in the academy, was what sets us apart is that we are a target-rich environment. We were attacked in 1993, and all of our facilities, if you step back and think about it, what do these, as I call them, the cowards, the terrorists, I call them cowards.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What do they want to do? They want to inflict as much pain and death as possible at one place at one time. And if you look at the tri-state area, we are very busy. At any moment on the George Washington Bridge during rush hour, you have thousands of people on there. At the airport, a busy day on the airport. Of course, the bus terminal, where we have thousands of people are coming through there in what we call the rush hour in the mornings and at night. And of course, you have the World Trade Center. And, they had attacked us in 93. And the senior officers always say they're going to come back. So that's what is the Port Authority Police. We're a bi-state agency. We protect all the major transportation facilities in New York and New Jersey.
That's cool. And a very, very vital thing for sure, with transportation constantly coming in and out of New York. Yeah. And all of that commerce that goes on. So with all of that history, now we can step into what actually happened to you on 9/11. So let's walk through kind of the moments where you first heard about what was going on. And so where was your duty station among all of those things?
So I was assigned so we graduated, my class, the 100th class, which was the centennial class. We graduated January 19th of 2001 at the World Trade Center at the Marriott.
Okay.
77 of us, about 50 of us were assigned to the bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan. So smack right down from Times Square. We sit between 40th Street and 42nd Street, between 8th and 9th Avenue. So just imagine there's 2 humongous buildings. I mean, they're a world within themselves.
Yep.
So we were assigned there. And to be honest with me, I was a go-getter. I was a Buffy guy. I wanted to work, and I was blessed to be surrounded by some senior cops who were willing to teach. And I'm talking cops that I don't know they exist today just because of the political environment. It's the guys who are hard on you. For those of you who understand me from being in the military, when you're the new guy, when you're the rookie, when you're the new recruit, you're going to get your chops busted.
Yep.
You do something wrong, you're going to learn, and you're going to never forget it, because they're going to bust your chops in a certain way. And that was the environment back then. The cops were tough on us rookies, but they were being tough for a reason. It was like tough love. Like when you screwed up, they really embarrassed you, but you remember, hey, I'm never doing that again.
Yep.
But they like guys that work, and I was blessed to be in a squad of guys that were workers. And I was living a dream on 9/11. I mean, up to that point, from January all the way to September, I got to do a lot of stuff that I wanted to do as a young man, as a police officer. Most importantly, out of everything, it wasn't the drug arrests or the gun collars. It was helping people, being able to help people and make a positive impact. That I would go home to my wife and say, today I felt like a cop. I was living a dream on September 11th. I mean, 6 weeks before the attack, me and my wife, Allison, and my little girl, Bianca, we bought our first home 6 weeks before the attack. And my wife was 7 months pregnant, so life for me was really was going well. I had the job that I wanted. I had a beautiful wife, a beautiful little 4-year-old girl, and a second little girl on the way. But on that morning, September 11th, I got up. It was a normal day. I worked day tour, 7 to 3. I got up, would go into our bedroom, kiss Allison goodbye in the morning, kiss her belly, walk into the next room to Bianca's room and kiss her goodbye, and literally just would skip down the stairs, because for those that know, when you do something you love, it's never work. And for me, being a police officer was never work. It was my dream. And never did I ever think about something going wrong, that you weren't coming home, and my wife too, she supported me. Never thought about that stuff, And even though in those 9 months we had some stuff that happened at the bus terminal that was kind of hairy, but it's just part of the job, you know. And that's why I tell young men and women, when you go into law enforcement, you go into the military, understand that you're choosing to do this, and
Yep.
it gets real. It gets real, you know, especially law enforcement. You know, you might be in a small town, but don't think that something can't happen to you there. That's why I always tell people, always be proactive. Always make sure you wear your vest. You know, don't be complacent, because any day something bad can happen. Hence 9/11. But went to work that day. It was a 20-minute ride from Clifton, New Jersey, where I lived, over to the New York side. Went into the bus terminal. It was a normal day. Went downstairs in the locker room, and you know, something I tell kids today, because I do speaking engagements, is you never outgrow high school. You know, and I think anybody who's been in the military, law enforcement, they know what I'm saying. You know, go in the locker room, go downstairs, and you know, you got full-grown men who are entrusted with the law and weapons, and they're acting like they're in high school. You know, we're busting chops and laughing, and you know, we put our uniforms on, we put our gun belts on, and we went upstairs to what's called roll call, where we're given our assignments. My assignment that way was post 35, which was on the corner of 42nd, 8th Avenue, between 42nd and 41st. So I had that whole block there. That was my area. I needed to patrol and make sure it was safe. So was just a normal morning. The only thing that's different is none of us that morning. Sometimes we would go get coffee and hang out a little bit before we relieved the off-going shift. But that morning, I don't know, we just all went to our post. And I went out there, and it was just a normal day. And if anybody who has never been in the city, it's busy in the mornings there, in the afternoons. People coming in, and what we call, like I referred to it before, the rush. We have a morning rush and we have an afternoon rush at the time. And basically, so just imagine these two humongous buildings in the midtown Manhattan, right smack in the middle. So in the mornings, you have thousands of people coming through this bus terminal. They're coming in on buses from New Jersey, Connecticut, upstate New York, other parts of the city, and they're coming through these buildings, thousands of people. And my job was to make sure this part of the buildings was safe. So I was standing in front of the doorways on 8th Avenue between 41st and 40th, and 42nd, just watching people come out. And our job is there to make sure people are safe, answer questions, attend to any medical conditions. And usually the rush will last you about, I don't know, an hour and a half, 2 hours till it calms down and everybody is at work. And I was looking at the doorway with 8th Avenue behind me, and the taxi cabs were right behind me. I was leaning up on a cab post, and above me is an awning. And when the awning would end right at 42nd Street, and I just happened to look over to my right, and I could see a Sergeant Ross, with two fellow officers standing there. And I just remember looking at Sergeant Ross, and he's like pointing at something coming through the air, and he's going like this. Now I can't see it, and there was a lot of city noise, so I couldn't hear it. But what happened was, when I looked over to the intersection of 42nd and 8th Avenue, for those who have never been to New York City, an intersection of 42nd and 8th, or anywhere in New York City, they're pretty large. It takes a little bit to get across. But for a split second, when I looked over, I saw a shadow come over the intersection of 42nd and 8th Avenue, which again, it's a large area, and it just covered it. It went dark, you know, pretty quickly. But I'm like, wow, that, like, the sun just went away and it came back. And I didn't think anything of it, and I just went back to doing my job. And that's shortly after that, that's when our radios crackled, and the police desk asked for all officers to come back to the police desk. So at that point, I start walking across 41st Avenue over to Post 5. And that's when I met up with my fellow officer, Dominic Pizzulo. Dominic had graduated with me in the 100th class. Dominic was a high school teacher who came over to become a Port Authority police officer. The benefits were great. The pay was great. You know, for me, that was a factor, but it wasn't the main factor. I just wanted to be a cop. But Dominic actually was a high school teacher. He was very loved as a high school teacher at his high school in the Bronx. He used to tell us in those 9 months leading up to September 11th how his students would come by his house and say, "Mr. Pizzulo, would you please come back to teach?" And he's like, "No, you know, I got a new career." And in those 9 months leading up to the attacks, Dominic understood and learned what it meant to be part of the Thin Blue Line, what we were as cops, as a family. And he was just a great, great guy. So we hooked up and we started walking back to the police desk. And I go by Will. My mom and dad call me Willie. And Dominic used to call me Willie because I go by Will. But Dom helped me out a couple of times with the move when I was moving in the summer. And I just didn't care. He called me Willie, and he's like, Willie, something bad must have happened for them to call us all back to the police desk. And I said, yeah, especially during the rush. They're actually taking every cop off all their major posts, leaving basically us, unprotected. So as we went back through the main terminal from 8th Avenue all the way back to 9th Avenue, we come around to where our police desk is toward 9th Avenue. And as you come around the police desk, you can look up, and our police desk always sat high. That's where our lieutenants, our sergeants were in the station. And I remember coming around the corner and looking up, and I can see them being a little bit frantic, And one of the things I learned when I was in the Navy, a second-class bosun mate taught me this when I was in the Navy. He goes, if we ever go into a bad situation, always follow somebody that knows what they're doing into a bad situation, because the percentage of you coming out of that bad situation is higher when you follow somebody in that knows their job. And that's why I stress everybody, you got to get over the rank or your title in the work we do, or if you're in the military, because that doesn't matter. When the shit hits the fan, what you need is people who are knowledgeable and can lead. And sometimes it could be someone who's a lower rank. You just need to be a leader. And one of those people that I always looked at, because I had been on several gun calls and several calls with him, was Sergeant John McLaughlin. And when I looked up at the desk, I could see concern in his face. And that kind of caught my attention. Like, if the sergeant's concerned, something's going down pretty bad. So we continued into what's called our reserve room. And I went in the back there, and we have a big TV set there. And New York One, this news station in New York, was on. And here's the towers. And here's Tower 1 with a humongous black gaping hole and smoke coming out of it. And that's when Sergeant Ross, who had seen the plane, yelled, "Those are terrorists." And the weird thing is, I always use this example. Like, I wasn't great at math. I'm good at math. If you owe me money, I know what you owe me with percentage. But, I never thought I'd use algebra, right? I never used it. I haven't need to use algebra. But in the academy, they told us that, like, we're Port Authority cops. They hit us in 93. They're going to come back. And of course, they tell you this, but it's in the back of your mind. And you're thinking, when am I going to see terrorism? And here it was. Everything they taught us in the academy was actually happening. Yeah. And I was like beside myself, like, I can't believe this is really happening. And at that point, I turned around, and, I'm aging myself here, because also when you're talking about Pearl Harbor and things like that, it shows you how old I am now. But, today I do speaking engagements, and I do ask children, do they know what a payphone is? And a lot of kids don't know what a payphone is. But I turned around, I grabbed the payphone that was there, and I got through to my wife, because that day the phone lines were all tied up. And I got through, because I would always let her know, like, if we had a shooting or anything crazy, let her know I was okay. Because at that time, believe it or not, we weren't allowed to carry our cell phones. So
which is completely crazy thinking of today.
Yeah. And again, cell phones were coming of age, so that's the way it was, So I got through to her. I let her know what's going on, and we had a couple mutual friends that worked at the World Trade Center, and she was asking me about them, and I said, "Look, I don't know what's going on. All I know is a plane has hit the building, and we don't know." And that's when our commanding officer and Inspector Fields walked into the reserve room and said, "Listen up." And I had told her I got to go, so I hung up on her. She later would tell me that's the first time I hung up on her without saying I love you. But at that moment, you just went into work mode. You got to make it here. And at that point, the inspector said, "Hey, we've commandeered a bus on 9th Avenue. We're going to call off names. Get on there. We're going out of the World Trade Center," which again is owned and operated by the Port Authority, protected by the Port Authority Police. We have a command center there, so we have cops assigned there. So at that point, myself, Dominic Pizzulo, and another senior officer, Mikey Robles, we didn't even wait for our names to get called. We just started walking down, got onto this bus, and about 20 of us got on there. Sergeant McLaughlin got into a police Suburban with the inspector and another sergeant, and we started heading down to the Trade Center. And usually it takes you, especially in the morning, it could take you 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get down there. We were flying. And us, man, I mean, again, I think anybody who's been in the military or law enforcement kind of understand, we're going to the call, and we're not there yet, and guys are trying to figure out what's going on, and nobody still can believe even back then in 2001, that an airliner was accidentally going to fly into the World Trade Center. So guys are like, "Hey man, it has to be a Piper, propeller plane, a glider," whatever they were coming up with. And we were just kind of chit-chatting, and we got down there pretty quick, and it was about 2 city blocks back when the bus went silent, and we looked out to our right, and we seen a person in the middle of the street. I mean, immense blood on the ground. There was a FDNY ambulance working on him. This is 2 city blocks back. Something flew back and hit this person. And that's when the bus just went silent, man. Everybody got like real serious. And we went up another block and we got off the bus, a block. So for those that don't know the World Trade Center, it would sit with the West Side Highway was a square, right? You had the West Side Highway, you had Liberty Street on the backside, you had Church Street, and you had Vesey Street. It's a 16-acre development there, the World Trade Center. And we got out a block from Vesey Street. And as we got off the bus, I just remember thinking to myself, here I am, a Navy veteran, 33 years old, thought myself as a tough guy, right? And I step off that bus and I look up and all I can see is Tower 1 on fire with that big gaping hole. And I look at the corner of 2. The corner of 2 was on fire. So in my mind, I thought, all right, the plane hit, blew up, deflected, and caught 2 on fire, the corner of it.
So you didn't know there was a second plane?
Oh, we didn't know that. So when we were en route from Midtown Manhattan to downtown, the second plane hit. So when we got out there, I'm thinking a plane hit, it's deflected. We never saw the big gaping hole on the other side. But what was really, and people have seen it, right? You've seen the videos of the smoke, the papers. I think what was so disheartening to me was being prior military was I felt this is a war on U.S. soil.
Yep.
And we all know that was the day the war started. But as an American sitting there, I couldn't believe there was war on our soil.
Yeah.
And
I remember specifically, my mom woke me up, and this is just a side story real quick, and we'll get right back to it. My mom woke me up, and I had to go to work a little bit later on. I was kind of like trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, at the time, because I'd just gotten out of high school and like a year out of high school. And my mom wakes me up and she's like, there's something going on in New York. And I walked downstairs to our little TV room. My dad was sitting there, and almost the exact moment the second plane hit, my dad had the same thought as you. And he looked at me and he said, John, we're at war.
Yeah.
And it was like gut punch time, but I'll let you continue. You guys are headed down to the towers, obviously. And what is kind of the mindset of everybody? Did you guys kind of know what was going on, or just still kind of chaotic?
We're standing there, we're staging. One of the sergeants said we're making a staging area, and we were there. Firefighters were there. We had all the departments. I mean, everybody was coming, but we're standing there. And I just remember standing there looking up, and that's when one of our senior officers, who was a rookie back in '93 and was in the '93 bombing, said, look, they're jumping. And when we looked up in the gaping hole, we could see people, unfortunately, jumping to their deaths. And, as we know, the fire was so intense that people didn't have a choice, and people were jumping by themselves. People were holding hands, and they kept jumping. And all I can think about was like, here we are in uniform, right? We're supposed to be tough guys. We got our shields, we got our guns, but you realize you felt this small. And I think that's a lesson I learned that day. I don't care how badass you think you are. There are events in this world that will just make you feel this big, and that was one of them. It's like standing in front of the ocean. And all I could think about was, man, we need to get up there. We need to be able to break a wall so they can see our uniforms and get these people home, because they kept jumping. And I kept thinking every time somebody jumped, it's like throwing a pebble in a lake and you get that ripple effect. That was somebody's mother, brother, sister. It just, the list goes on. And, I tell people this, you got to understand how much your life means to people around you. You might not see it every day. Sometimes maybe we're not having a good day, or you're depressed, or whatever the case may be, but you are important in this world, and those people were important. And every time somebody jumped, I knew the ripple effects were going to be immense. So at that point, I'm just standing there, like not knowing what to do. And that's when Sergeant McLaughlin came running. He had parked the Chevy Suburban up on the Church of Vesey and literally ran through a field of destruction, because from the point we were to Vesey Street, there was nothing on that Vesey Street except destruction. I mean, there was nothing. And he comes running from there and says, hey, I need volunteers. I need guys that know how to use Scott air packs. Again, the Port Authority, we're cross-trained not only law enforcement, but firefighting. So hence, Scott air packs, for those that don't know, those are the breathing apparatuses you see firefighters wear. And I remember myself, Dominic Pizzulo, which I mentioned, and another fellow officer that graduated with us, Antonio Rodriguez, who had 4 years on the NYPD, but came over to the Port Authority for better benefits and pay. We volunteered. We said, look, we graduated the academy in January. We can go. So at that point, Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. And so we start running. And I got to be honest with you, You know, the way I look at it, I've been blessed to meet a lot of veterans who unfortunately had to see combat from Vietnam and in the Gulf War. And, you know, one of the things we talk about is like, you know, we're macho, right? We're supposed to be tough, but we're human beings too. And I was scared because as we're running, it's only 4 of us and there's human remains, there are pieces of plane, there's debris. And I look back and the rest of the guys are standing there staging. And I knew they were going to have a job to do, but for that moment, it was just us. But then what I tell people is, where does courage come from? And courage comes from overcoming your fears. And I'll be honest with you, I could see fear, concern in all the guys' faces. But then I thought about it. I took an oath to serve and protect. And those people up there, they're depending on us. And that's why I tell people, when you take an oath, when you give your word, and that's what I was brought up on, you give your word, you keep your word. And, you know, so I just remember thinking, you got to forge forward. And we went forward. We got to building 5, whereas the entrance. And for those that don't know, the World Trade Center is 2 large buildings connected by a concourse level, a mall level. So you would enter through that mall level and, you know, there's shops and restaurants and escalators that took you down to the subway and to the PATH train. And then a hallway would lead you to Tower 2 and another hallway would lead you to Tower 1. So when we got to the side of the building, Sergeant Glock said, Jimeno, take our PR-24s, our billy clubs at the time, our equipment, run up to the Chevy Suburban, drop all our stuff in there, come back and meet us here. I said, all right, meet us at the E-room. E-rooms are set up throughout the World Trade Center where first responders can get bunker gear, helmets, oxygen tanks, whatever we need in an emergency. It's strategically placed throughout the building. So I said, okay. I ran up, came around the corner of Church Street. The Chevy Suburban was crushed. Something came and hit. That's when I realized, hey, dummy, there's stuff falling from above. Because, you know, anybody who's been in any type of fluid situation, so much is happening, you know, it takes you a second to catch up and a second to think like, okay, there's concrete falling from above, you know, and you're not thinking that till I saw this police Suburban. I threw our equipment in and I looked down Church Street. That's when I realized, man, what's going on? Really, it's still computing. There's thousands of people being herded out from the building. Again, I don't know that Tower 2's hit. They're getting people out of there. They're just running them out. So I run back, hook up with the guys. There wasn't much gear in there as far as bunker coats. So me and Dominic couldn't put bunker coats on because the bunker coats were too small. Antonio Rodriguez looked like a firefighter with guns on his side. We looked like cops with, you know, with firefighter gear with guns on our sides. We checked each other's gear and we promised each other at that moment, no matter what happens, we don't leave each other. And Sergeant Lachlan at that point said, come on, let's go. So we just started following him. And
so how far into the building were you guys? I know you were on one of the lower levels when it collapsed, correct?
Yeah, so we were at the beginning. We're literally in the concourse. So we went downstairs.
So you just go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we had to go down one more level. Sergeant Glock said, follow me one more level to the police desk. We got to the police desk. And what's weird is, if you have ever watched the French documentary where the French guys actually follow, first they start off with the FDNY and they actually see the plane crash into the building. Those guys break off from the FDNY and hook up with Port Authority police detectives. They're actually at the police desk with us. And you actually see my sergeant, Sergeant McLaughlin. At that point, he just told us, hey, guys, start getting equipment in this mail canvas cart. So we started getting more equipment. We go back up into the concourse level, and I'm pushing this cart now. And we're pushing the cart, and we're heading toward Tower 1, what I'm assuming. And I tell people the one thing I saw on 9/11, and it's something I wish, I hate to say it, you know, it's something I wish I can share with everybody today, especially with the bad political environment and all the kind of like how we're at each other's throats. On September 11th, it didn't matter what color skin you were, what language you spoke, who you were voting for. There was a steady flow of people coming from Tower 1 helping each other. I remember seeing a black gentleman and a white gentleman carrying this blonde woman who had a severe cut on her leg, and they're all in a single file line. Now, mind you, people are dead, people are hurt, but these people are helping each other. And I thought to myself, man, if these civilians can be this heroic, us in uniform, we need to be 3 notches above them because they're depending on us. And I remember just pushing on. There was about 2 inches of water on the deck, came around to an intersection where we could have went to Tower 1 or made a left to go to Tower 2. We bump into some other Port Authority cops. We exchange some words with them. Sergeant Glock said, let's go. We're going to Tower 2. Again, I don't know. Whatever this man says, I'm doing. So we start going down that hallway. We leave our fellow officers. Unfortunately, it was 5 of them. They were lost that day. We never recovered their bodies because people were just disintegrated when those buildings came down. But we start heading down the hallway to Tower 2, and we meet up with another fellow officer, Christopher Amoroso. There's a famous picture of Chris from the Daily News where he's saving a woman. He had already saved like 4 people, but he came back, and he had been recently transferred from the bus terminal to the World Trade Center. But, you know, Chris was that kind of guy that we have a saying in law enforcement, I'll go through a door with you. That means I trust this guy with my life. No matter what's on the other side, I'm going through with you. And that's the kind of guy he was. And if you look at that picture, you'll see that he was already injured. And when he came up to us, he said, Sarge, can I join you guys? And Sergeant McClock said, yeah, you can join. He put it over the air that he was going to be hooked up with us. And at that moment, we said, Chris, are you all right? He's like, man, don't worry about me. We got to get more people out. Now, mind you, all the people on our team, which at that point we became a team of 5 of us, we're all fathers. We're married. We have kids. I kind of want to say, you know, we're not no superheroes. We're just doing our job, just like you when you joined the military. We're just regular Americans doing our jobs and doing what we love. But at that point, the team of 5, we started heading to Tower 2. And so when you got to the towers, there was these big glass revolving doors, and you can look through and see the lobby of Tower 1 or Tower 2. So we were looking into the lobby of Tower 2. Sergeant Glock said, Jimeno, stay here with the cart. The rest of you guys come downstairs. We're going to another emergency room to get more equipment. As I stood there, I'm looking into the lobby of 2. And let me tell you, man, that fear came over me again because I see people who are now dead, see people injured. Across the way, I could see Liberty Street. Our cops and the NYPD cops are shooting literally glass out so more people can get out of the buildings.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad. And unfortunately, there was distinct sounds. And the distinct sounds were one of concrete falling. You could see it, you could hear it, and you knew what it was. But then there was that other distinct sound, which was of a human body coming down. And I see bodies coming down, but I knew they were landing on people, and it was just, you know. And listen, again, 33 years old, military, and I'm shaken up. And that's when a fellow officer came walking up to me. He was a senior officer from the George Washington Bridge. His name was Bruce Reynolds. Short, African-American guy, bald. Shouldn't have been in the building because he had a lung condition from another incident. But here he was, putting his life on the line. He was sweating. And, he just says to me, man, he says, Reynolds, GWB, George Washington Bridge. I said, Meno, BT, bus terminal. And, we talked a little bit. And the one thing I remember him saying is like, kid, it's going to be a long day, but we'll get a lot of people home. And, I needed that. I needed a senior officer to say that to me because it was how we uplift each other in a moment of crisis. But then the team started coming up, and Sergeant McLaughlin was coming, and Bruce said, see you later, stay safe. And that's the last time I would see him. He'd actually perished when that building came down. At that point, we threw more equipment in there, and Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. We're going to Tower 1. So at that point, believe it or not, I had pushed the cart from the police desk all the way there. And Antonio Rodriguez says to me, Will, you're going to be exhausted because, again, we got all our gear on. We're sweating. The adrenaline's going. And he says, let me push the cart. I said, all right, right. Sounds like good teamwork, right? So now he gets behind the cart. We're going to head back down this hallway to the end, make a left, go to 1. But as we're halfway down this hallway, Sergeant McLaughlin's radio goes off, and it's our inspector asking us where we're at. And he's telling them the location. Then some firefighters and an EMT are coming, and Sergeant McLaughlin says, hey, be careful. I just came up from the B1 level, and the elevator shafts are buckling. As we know, if anything is not secure at the base, the top's not good. And man, I'm telling you, it was a miracle. We happened to stop with our doorway to our right. Now, I didn't know those buildings like the back of my hand. Sergeant McLaughlin did. Had been down there for maybe 2 or 3 protests, but I didn't know the buildings. Sergeant McLaughlin had helped set up the security after 93 bombing there. And as he's talking, we're looking like we're going to Tower 1 with the lobby behind us to 2. That's when we hear a humongous boom. And I turn around and I look back in the lobby of 2, and man, I see a fireball. I mean, the size of my house. And remember when I said, follow somebody who knows what they're doing because your chances of getting out are better? Well, I'm standing there holding my helmet, and everything is shaking. It's like an earthquake. I mean, I don't know what I'm to do. I'm just standing there. And that's when Sergeant McLaughlin said, run toward the elevator. I looked at Dominic. Dominic was running. I start running. Sergeant McLaughlin was right behind me. And that's the first time when I hit that hallway, I said, Will, what did you get yourself into? Because I could see lights flickering and I could see brown stuff, which what I know today is the building coming down. So what happens is as the building's coming down, any building, as it collapses, it's going to send debris in 4 different directions, right? All that stuff's coming. To show you why I share this with people today, especially if you're young and you're going to get into law enforcement, you're going to get into the military, you want to be a leader. Sergeant McLaughlin, in that split second, his knowledge was the beginning of my survival. Because at that moment, what he saw, which I didn't see, was the wall of debris coming at us. What did he think? He thought car bomb. What do they do in the Middle East? They'll blow something up, let the first responders come in, kill them.
Tiered attacks.
Yeah, so he thought, hey, if I can get my team toward this freight elevator, maybe the steel beams, the elevator beams might deflect the explosion around my team and I can save some of us. I didn't know that till 3 years later because we never talked about it till like 3 years later when we were sitting there having a beer and kind of reminiscing. Because, you know, for a long time, we were just rehabbing. But at that point, we ran in there and, man, just the whole world came down on us. And unfortunately, at that moment, we lost Antonio Rodriguez and Christopher Amoroso in the initial collapse, leaving myself, my sergeant, and Dominic buried alive. So it was a bad deal. The only way I can describe it's like just imagine 1 million freight trains coming down on you. That's what it was, you know.
So were you conscious the entire time? Did you ever lose consciousness during the collapse, or were you just conscious and it just happened so fast that you weren't aware of what was going on until it kind of came to a rest?
Well, I'll be honest with you. We never knew the buildings came down all night long. We never knew. We just knew that something happened, and Sergeant McLaughlin thought it was a car bomb. So right away, we're thinking car bomb, you know. So, you know, at that point, it began, you know, a very, very long evening for us on staying. But during that course, you know, we ended up losing Dominic on the second collapse. So we actually had both buildings fall on us. And I cannot, you know, really, it was bad. It was bad all night long trying to survive.
So, 13 hours is essentially what you were under basically 2 massive buildings. And, you know, what's going through your mind? I mean, obviously you think it's a car bomb, but what's going through your mind? Because like what position was your body in? How were you able to move anything, or were you just basically just like snugged in a pile of concrete and metal?
Well, I'll use the words by my lead rescuer, Scott Strauss from the NYPD ESU-1, the SWAT unit. When he got to me, I looked like I had been dumped out of a cement truck. He goes, "You look like you were wrapped in a cocoon of concrete." But I ended up on my back in a 45-degree angle, and literally I had a wall. What I know today was a wall come down on me, come from under here all the way down my left side. It hit me and buried Dominic to my left in the initial collapse. After we could see, I was basically only had about 3 feet to my right, about, I don't know, 18 inches above, not even, probably like 15 inches above me was all concrete. And to my feet, I couldn't see anything but concrete. And Sergeant McLaughlin was about, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 feet on the other side. So we were basically in a cocoon, you know, and we never lost consciousness. That was something that Sergeant McLaughlin, you know, kept telling us, you know, and again, kudos to his experience, because from the very get-go, after we were able to kind of gather ourselves after the initial collapse, he said, "Sound off." I said Jimeno, and Pizzulo said Pizzulo. Sergeant McLaughlin, the initial collapse was actually just stuck in a fetal position. Dominic wasn't injured either. He was just compacted. I was actually being crushed from the wall. And at that point, you know, we started trying to work the problem, you know, just basically leaning on our training. Yep. Sergeant McLaughlin said, you know, "What can you guys do?" I explained the situation. I couldn't do anything. Dominic was able to get out of his Scott Air Pack, literally had to crawl over my face. And it was a tough decision at that point, because Dominic said, "Sarge, I can go up the hole and go get help," because it was about 30 feet up. And Sergeant Glock said, no, you can't. You need to get Jimeno out, and then you and Jimeno get me out, which is, basic training. You're going to get your team. You don't leave anybody behind. But, and I tell people this, we're not at that point, Dominic wasn't a military person, I felt, hey, that's what we got to do. But Dominic, said, hey, Will, I can go up and get help and come back. And Sergeant Glock said, don't, because you'll never find us. It's a debris field up there. It's a hard decision to make at that point. And we talked about it because he said, I got a wife and kid at home. I said, bro, I got a wife and kid and a baby on the way. And it took a little bit, but, Dominic did the right thing. He turned around. He was starting to try to dig me out. And it took, he was actually, believe it or not, kicking my ass because there was a piece of rebar wrapped around me on my right side. And but it would whip back and hit me. And this went on for a little bit. And we laughed down there, and I think anybody who's in a bad, severe situation can appreciate what laughter can do in a very stressful moment. And we laughed because I said, bro, you're kicking my ass. And after a while, he sat back and he goes, Willie, I can't get you. And that's when that fear came over. And that's when we heard the other boom. Yeah. That's when that came down. And at that point, Sergeant McLaughlin is now being crushed to the point that, how a police officer's gun sits off his body. It was actually being pushed into his body. He's yelling, I'm yelling more pain. And unfortunately, Dominic took a big hit that ended up taking his life. But, in his last moments, he was still thinking about the team, and we lost him. And at that point, it really, really got really bad in there. And we literally had to fight for our lives continuously. And Sergeant McLaughlin said, we can't fall asleep. If we fall asleep, we'll die. So all night long, I would yell at him. He would yell at me if we dozed off. And I got a big mouth, so I was close to the hole. So I just kept yelling all night long. PAPD, officers down. Can anybody help us? But what we didn't know was we were literally in the epicenter. And they had to stop rescue workers later that morning because people were getting injured because things were still collapsing. That started our survival for the next 8 hours. 10 hours, excuse me. A lot of bad things happened down there. We had a lot of fireballs come in. My buddy's Dominic's gun went off. It was really, really bad.
Yeah. So what was the darkest hour, I would say, for you in this 8 hour period? Obviously, everybody is fighting, but there have to be moments where you really think, man, I don't know if we're going to make it out of there. But what was the darkest hour, and what was it that pulled you through that darkest time?
Well, a lot of times I go in depth into exactly what happened hour by hour, which we'd be here for a long time. But a lot of bad things happened down there, things that I hope nobody ever has to go through. Yeah. It was later that evening after the collapse of Building 7. It was starting to get dark. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm tired. We had become 4 times the size because we're suffering from compartment syndrome. By this time, we had been crushed. We lost 3 team members, fellow officers. The gun went off. Fireballs came in. I was just depleted. I was done. I mean, we kept each other going, but I just said, I want to die. I want to give up. And this is the most important part, I feel. And it's not, I always say it's not my story. It's a human story. If it's a story that somebody. And at that point, I'm being, again, Catholic. I made my peace with God. I said, God, thank you for 33 great years. Thank you for my parents to bring me to this great country. Allow me to be an American, allow me to be a cop. Thank you for my beautiful wife, Allison, of 6 years, 4 years of my little girl, Bianca. And I said, God, I'm ready to die. I said, I'm okay. I die today. I die as an American police officer trying to do the right thing against these cowards. And at that moment, I felt everybody was going to go to heaven. The people that were working in the World Trade Center that day were just average Americans doing their jobs for their families, providing for them. And I felt everybody was going to go to heaven that day. And I said, God, I'm going to ask you for 2 things. One is to allow me somehow, some way to be there in December, the beginning of December, because my little girl was due. I said, I just want to be, I know how hard it was going to be for my wife, Allison, to lose me. And the second thing, and I always tell people, you can laugh at this. I said, God, when I get to heaven, because I know we're all going there, is, man, can I have a glass of water? Because we were caked in concrete. Yeah. Yep. So
all that dust and debris coming in. How did you guys breathe, honestly?
Well, it's incredible. And that's another thing, what the human body can endure. Because when later, I mean, they were pulling rocks out of my lungs for days. It's amazing what the body can do. We actually started breathing in the smoke. You know, even when our workers were there, they were choking. We weren't. How, I don't know. But and I said, God, the second thing is I just a glass of water, and I closed my eyes and I tell everybody I was going to give up. And I had a vision, a dream, whatever you want to call it. I see him walking toward me with a white robe, no face, brown hair, and he's walking toward me. And I don't know, just peace came over me. Like my pain left, and over his left shoulder in the distance is a small pond with trees around, real tranquil. Over his right shoulder, he was walking like through a field, and I could see just tall grass, and it was peace. And as he comes toward me, I know who it is. To me, it's Jesus. And what has he got in his hand? And I tell people, you can laugh. He had a big bottle of water. I don't know if it was Poland Spring, Avion, what the heck it was, but I snapped out of that dream, that vision, with a fire in my gut. And I made a decision at that point. If I'm going to die, I'm not going to let these cowards win by me giving up. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die fighting to get back to my family, because I felt if I'd given up, I wouldn't have fought hard enough for them. I would have not fought hard enough to let somebody hear me so they can get to my sergeant. I would have given up on America, my country, because I decided to die. And I said no. But most of all, I felt I would have been giving up on myself. And I said, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die on my terms. And it's something that I've been blessed to meet people who inspire me, such as cancer patients who know I only got so much time, but you know what? I'm going to live every freaking day till that time comes. And at that moment, I said, I'm going to keep fighting till I can't fight anymore. And believe it or not, 8 o'clock that night, I hear United States Marine Corps. Can anybody hear us? And I'm thinking I'm going crazy. 2 Marine reservists and a civilian broke through the lines and came into the epicenter, and they found us. And at that point, they called, they sent the civilian down what they called a pile, and he bumped into NYPD ESU, which is emergency service, their SWAT unit. And that's when the whole cavalry came. And then that started a 3-hour rescue to get me out of there, which I cannot commend. And I love these guys. You know, they're family. Me, Scott Strauss, Patty McGee, and a young man named Chuck Sharika, who used to be an EMT, a civilian who came off the street somehow, joined them and was administering me first aid. And these guys put their lives on the line for the next 3 hours with an encroaching fire. Just imagine your worst nightmare multiplied by 1,000,000. That's what it was like down there.
Yeah. So it took them 3 hours to dig you out of that.
Yeah, it took 3 hours to get me out, to extract me, because my leg was caught. It was a lot. I mean, and you know, here we are in the greatest nation on earth and with the best equipment. Everything that got to us down this line of God knows how many people was always either broken, didn't work, something's happened. So they literally did it by hand. And it took them 3 hours to get me out. They finally got me out. And they had to switch teams because these guys were exhausted. And I remember telling the Sarge, hold on. They put me on a Stokes basket, but they brought me out of the hole. And that's the first time I cried that day. I didn't cry for my injuries. I didn't cry when the guys died. I cried because when they pulled me out of the hole, I looked up and I could see the sky, because as we all know, it was a beautiful Tuesday. It was just not a cloud in the sky, but I could see the moon. I could see smoke, but I couldn't see the towers. And that's when I said, where's everything? And the firefighter said, it's all gone, kid. And at that point, I cried because I felt we failed. There were so many people still in the concourse area, and I felt we failed. We failed these people. We couldn't get all these people out. And they sent me down a long line, put me in an ambulance, took me to Bellevue. I flatlined twice that night.
Oh, my goodness.
My sergeant, who was it was only me and him that were buried alive under it. About 18 of us came out, 13 in a stairwell, me and my sergeant, 2 other people that were topside earlier when the first initial collapse happened. And Mrs. Guzman, who's a Port Authority employee, was the last person found topside at noon the next day. You know, what I tell people is, if we live for a reason, all of us, was to show the cowards in the world that you don't bring America down. You're not going to kill them. We're going to survive, and we're going to move forward.
Yeah. And so that resiliency that's built in, and the beautiful picture of, you know, civilians and military and police and firefighters all running in, and 441 gave their lives in those collapses, but it didn't stop. And we kept fighting, and we kept pulling out and saved you know, all of those people, including yourself. And it was a team effort by just the American spirit.
Exactly.
That just want to help a fellow man.
You know, you're describing America. And that's, you know, again, that today, this is something I wish I can touch every person that has some crazy political view, just to say, hey, do you get it? Do you know what and you understand what they were attacking? They were attacking our freedoms. They were attacking us. So they love the cowards. They love to see us fight amongst ourselves, and we shouldn't. We have to understand that even if we have different political views, that cop, that firefighter, that EMT, even if they don't agree with you politically, they're still going to come and put their lives on the line to get you out.
Yep.
Understand that Americans care about each other. And it's been since 9/11. We've seen it at the Boston bombing. We've seen it in the natural disasters like the Redneck Navy. And that's why I tell people, anytime you tell me or the media or those that want to divide us say we're divided, no, we're not. We are more American, and we're more tight with each other than most people think. And all these horrific events have shown that at the time of need, people step up. And that's why I would say one of the favorite quotes that I have is by Edmund Burke is, you know, all that evil needs to triumph. There's good men to stand by, do nothing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Women today and every day that are going to step up to fight evil.
Yep. And that's absolutely true. That's the call that we push here on Survival Dispatch, and on my own personal side of things. I have another podcast where we talk about being righteous savages, being able to be righteous, but also be able to unleash that ability to do whatever it takes to fight evil. And that's just an important message that I think more and more people need to hear, because we need to stop being afraid to step in the gap and do the things that are necessary to stop evil. It's 100% so important. So after this, you went through multiple surgeries, correct?
Yes.
And so let's rewind just a second. Was Sergeant McLaughlin pulled out after you or before you?
No, almost 8 hours after me. He came out at 7 in the morning the next day. He was buried almost 24 hours. I mean, total 22 hours.
Wow, that is crazy. But they were able to pull him out. I imagine they were really concerned with, you know, that kind of domino effect when the building falls, is that it's not done falling even when it seems to come to rest.
Well, at that point, not only the buildings were down, but the problem is where we were was so dangerous. There were encroaching fires. It took 18 different rescue workers, FDNY, NYPD, also Nassau County ESU were rotating 18 of them to get him out by hand. You know, and I just talked to him today. We both took real severe injuries. He took double mine, and he still deals with injuries today. And I tell people, we are done with 9/11 is the day they bury us, but we still suffer from the physical and the psychological things from that day.
Yep. And so let's get into that, and real quick talk about life after 9/11 and going through kind of putting things back together, I guess. Obviously your wife had another child just a few months later. And what was key in your healing and dealing with, you know, obviously like PTSD is a real thing. It's a psychological thing that affects so many people. I spend a lot of time with war veterans and, you know, guys from special forces, and train a lot with them. And it is, it's very, it's an elusive thing. It's a very, very strange thing, the way that it affects different people different ways. But what was your experience in really trying to come back to being the father, the husband, and the pillar of the community after?
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, first and foremost, I say my wife is, you know, and all the wives and husbands who support their loved ones that serve, God bless you, because they go through a lot. You know, they wear uniform just like we do, our family members. So to the family members out there, God bless you guys. But my wife put up with so much, and I didn't know I had PTSD, as most people don't know, right? It's just, there's something off about us, something different after we see combat or an incident, you know. And for me, when I got home, and here I am, right? You should think, hey, here's this guy, survived 9/11, is alive. has a beautiful wife, a beautiful 4-year-old girl, and now a new baby. But I came home and Allison told me right off the bat, she felt that I wasn't right. And my thing was anger. And I tell everyone PTSD comes in so many different fashions. It could be anger, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be alcoholism. And, you know, the list goes on and on. There's no one thing. I want people out there to understand that PTSD comes in so many different variations that you don't think, oh, well, I don't have PTSD. Yeah, you might have it. You know, and it you had to see in combat. You could have been in a bad car accident. Maybe you saw a loved one get killed somehow. That's post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And you have women with postpartum. That's a form of PTSD. I didn't know. All I knew was I was getting angry a lot, and I didn't know. But Allison knew. And what turned the point for me where I realized that I needed help was one evening. I've never lifted my hand to a woman, but one night it was the silliest thing. I couldn't find the remote control. People weren't moving fast enough. And Allison kind of yelled at me like, hey, you need to calm down. And I picked up a shoe and I was going to wing it at her. And as I was going to, I caught myself like, yo, who are you? This is who you. And I dropped the shoe and I got in my truck because I was driving. I was able to drive because my injuries happened on my left side. And I drove up. I'm a big outdoorsman. So I drove up to the country, sat there, and I just thought, and I said, there's something wrong with me. I don't know what it is. And I felt lost. I felt alone. I felt scared. But what I thought about was people that are raised by parents who are alcoholic or abusers or sexually abuse their kids, sometimes, and a lot of times, those children grow up to be their parents. What I thought was, if I'm not a good father, if I'm not a good husband, through me, these cowards will touch another generation of Americans. I've always said this, macho is doing what you have to do when you have to do it. I went home. I was embarrassed. I walked, my wife went in there, apologized to her. I walked into Bianca's room and I said, Bianca, does daddy yell a lot? And she goes, yeah, daddy, sometimes you scare us. And at that point, I realized I need to do my part in trying to get better. And that was a very long, hard process. What I tell people is again, where does courage come from is overcoming your fears. I had fears. Who do I want to talk to? Will they take my gun from me? Will I lose my job? You know, there's a lot of factors. And what I want people to understand that for me, my journey will never be the answer to your journey. Everybody has a different blueprint or different roadmap. But for me was talking to therapist after therapist and understanding that I sat there a lot of times. I'm like, this is BS. This person, I don't even want to talk to. But it was finally, I found someone that I really gelled with, and God bless her soul, because she passed from 9/11 illness, Debbie Mandel. She said the key for me was, she goes, you know, you're never going to get rid of this. You're going to have to learn to live with this. And that's something I stress to anybody out, any of my brothers or sisters out there that are dealing with it, was what you have is no different than someone who had been raped or abused. They have to learn to live with that. So at that point, I started figuring out, how do I live with this anger? And for me was, hey, when I feel it coming on, and let me tell you, I've done things before getting that treatment where I'm embarrassed in front of my children. You know, I would have to later, as they grew up, apologize and explain to them, that's not daddy. That is a version of daddy that I don't even know. But I had to learn to, okay, I'm getting angry, go for a walk, go hit a bag, go do something, let that negative energy out. You know, and again, that worked for me because of anger. I can't imagine what someone with anxiety, depression goes through, but you have to figure it out. And that's what I've been able to do. I have been able to channel that negative energy, get ahead of it. My wife has been involved with that. She would tell me, hey, you're getting angry, and I have to try to let it go. And it's been really good for me for a lot of years. Does it rear its ugly head up sometimes? Yes, it does, because it'll catch me off guard. I mean, it's to the point that, you know, there were times I was so angry, I probably, you know, could have hurt somebody. And then there were times that I thought about taking my own life twice. You know, I didn't, because what I want people to understand was I started doing speaking engagements, and that helped me because I was helping fellow veterans, fellow law enforcement officers on, hey, I need to live. Life is short. And I want everybody out there who has served or is in a dark place to understand that you need to reach what, as I call it, the sunrise. You know, I wrote a book, Sunrise to the Darkness, is when you're in a dark place, you need to fight to find that sunrise, because you need to be happy, especially if you're a person who has served in the military or serving as a law enforcement officer, firefighter, EMT, doctor. We see things that other people don't get to see, and nor should they. But at the end of the day, you need to be happy. You need to be able to enjoy your family, enjoy life. We can't just see combat or incidents and then suffer the rest of our lives with that. And it took a lot of a community really to help me, my family, my fellow officers, and believe it or not, other survivors from different instances. We would talk and be like, okay, what are you going through? This sucked, that sucked. But you know what's the best thing? Being able to wake up one day and see your kids grow up, spend time with your loved one. And those are moments that I try to tell people that, that's what I want for everybody. I want you to be able to live one more minute, one more hour, one more day, one more year than the alternative, which is what we lose so many, especially I'll talk to about our veterans. We're losing like 40 a day now.
Yeah.
And that's something that I want them to understand, that if I can go through such a horrific event, which is the day the war started in the U.S., that they who have served us should come home and be able to live their lives. And does that message get across? Yes. I've been very blessed to get veterans who have reached out to me and have said, hey, man, your words maybe not take that step to death.
Yeah.
Have we lost some? Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not going to save everybody. And it breaks my heart every time, especially after like last year, I spoke to a group of veterans, and, I later find out that one of them killed themselves. At the same time, I got notice of another one that was on the brink of killing themselves and said, I thought about what you said. And that's where the book Sunrise Through the Darkness, which I wrote, came about, was from a Marine, because I was speaking in 2008, 2009. The war in Iraq was really raging. And I would always ask in the class, like one of my speaking engagements, I would say, hey, who was in theater? Because I didn't want to ask anybody, hey, did you see combat? I would say, hey, who was in theater? And that would really mean the people that were in combat knew, hey, I was in theater. I know what you mean. Mm-hmm. But after one speaking engagement, this one Marine came up and shared some stuff. I didn't think anything of it. I'm always blessed to get some really kind words from people. The following year, he came back, and at the end of the speaking engagement, he just said, hey, please listen to Will. I was in a bad place thinking about doing something bad, and I went and got help. And I remember that just like blew my mind. And since then, I've been blessed to have people come up and say, hey, you made a positive impact in my life, where I didn't go down that dark road. I'm able to heal my family. And that's the main thing. I wrote the book with a doctor of psychology, a friend of mine, Michael Mose, who worked out of Colorado Springs with a lot of military people. And he always said it. What he finds with especially military families is why? Why did our loved one take their lives? And there's no real clear answer. It's just a matter of that, people have to understand you got to keep fighting. You went and fought for us. Understand you need to fight, and there are people here that are willing to fight with you. You have to come out of your shell. You have to be able to talk to people. And I understand, because I understand what it's like as a man. How do I tell someone, hey, I'm not right? But you can get right, and that's what I want people to understand, that, again, if you get a chance to read the Sunrise Through the Darkness, pick up the book, read it. There's exercises in there that Michael really thought was important, because he said, you know what? A lot of guys and gals don't want to talk to anybody. So I put exercise in there that will help them, where it might push them to go get help. You know what I'm saying? So you can ask yourself, and different exercises that will help you start the process of healing. And that's the main thing I want you to understand, that you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. We're humans. We see things, it affects us. And you just have to be able to find a good place to come back to, learn to live with it. Just like someone who's a former drug abuser or an alcoholic, they're living with that. Every day they can go back. Every day, anybody who has PTSD could take that dark road, but you choose not to, and you learn to fight and find a way toward happiness.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what role in this healing process for you did your faith play in this? We've talked about that quite a bit tonight, but and what role did that, and how did that shape kind of your mission to help others who've experienced hardship in their lives, and through your book and your speaking and just encouraging others?
Well, it's those three words my mom instilled me: faith, hope, and love. You have to have faith. And if you don't have faith in a religion, that's fine too. If you don't believe in God, hey, that's okay. But you have to have faith in yourself at least. Hope. We always have to have hope. Always hoping. But of course, hope is not the mechanism to get there. You have to fight for it. And love for yourself, because when you can love yourself, you're going to take care of yourself. You're going to be better. And that way you can give love to everybody around you.
Mm-hmm.
Those words, which is, of course, at the heart of being a Catholic, faith, hope, and love is what helped me. And it's easier said. I always tell people, all the words you hear me say, they're easy. It's when you're at a dark moment, you have to really rely, for me, on my faith, my hope, and my love to push me through. And let me tell you, there were a lot of times that I was on the brink of going the wrong way, but I kept thinking about, you got to keep fighting for various reasons. For the guys that died, if I had chosen the dark road of suicide, it's like I'm disrespecting them, disrespecting my family. What example am I for my children? So when how do I describe this for anybody who's been there, understands? It's almost like you don't know who you are, what's going on. It's almost like the body wants to take over and do. You need to step into there and you need to fight for yourself, because there's so much good in the future once you get past these bad places that you look back and say, man, I'm glad I didn't do that. I'm able to see my little girl play soccer. I'm able to see my little boy win an award. I'm able to take a vacation, my beautiful spouse. Those moments are where you're fighting for. Don't let what you served and the incidents that happen in your life cheat you from days. I always use this example. There's 365 days in a year. If we're lucky to reach 90, you do the multiplication. When we're born into diapers. And if we're lucky enough to hit 90, you might be back in diapers.
Yep.
Do the math, 365 times 90. That's not a lot of days on this earth. Most of us won't be 90. So you realize that's not a lot of days on this earth. So why cut yourself off from those days that you can make so many memories and impact people in a positive way? Your family, your loved ones, So I tell people, you're not only fighting for yourself, you're fighting for those that love you. And trust me, I don't care if you feel nobody loves you. People do love you. People are there for you. Understand you are never alone.
Yeah. And I think that's really where understanding the idea, and this is a military police, it's one of my best friends is a former police officer, SWAT cop, and understanding those communities, understanding brotherhood. And brotherhood, that's a male term, but community is probably, a more accurate term of being there for each other, understanding what each other's going through. And you cannot, I think probably the biggest thing of my own understanding and dealing with people that are going through PTSD is that they need to know that somebody is there for them, because that's the isolating feeling of like, oh, I was a failure, or, oh, I can't deal with this. And having those people to lift you up in those moments is just paramount for getting through the dark times. We all go through dark times. Everybody goes through dark times, and varying degrees of magnitude. But, maybe it's your marriage is on the rocks. Maybe you lost a loved one, but we all go through dark times, and it's having that community to lift you up and connect you back to, back to what matters. And
what I tell people too, one of the things that I had to learn was, don't have the answers for everybody, and I use this example, and I think every man out there knows, somebody's in a shooting and they get shot, and the other person who works with them never been shot, but they're like, well, I would have done it this way, or I could have done this. Sometimes when your fellow officer, your fellow soldier, sailor is expressing themselves, sometimes just shut up and listen. Sometimes that's what people need. They need an ear. Don't give your 2 cents, especially if you're not qualified. Or be the tough guy and say, well, just fucking suck it up.
Yeah.
Sometimes when that person takes their life, then you realize, that doesn't work. Sometimes just being able to be a soundboard, to listen to somebody and then understand, man, that person needs help. Let me try to help them somehow, is important. Be a person who's able to listen to someone who's struggling, because sometimes that's the other thing. People take their lives because they're trying to express themselves, but it doesn't come out right. Take the time to listen to somebody. Let's not be, and we've all been there, right? Like, oh, I can't believe that person killed themselves. I kind of knew something was wrong. You know, be brave enough to also say, hey, man, if you ever need to call me 24/7. I'm here to listen. And I don't have the answers, but maybe together we can figure out or get you on the right path to be able to find somebody. You know, it's about to uplift, like you said, uplifting each other means listening to each other and helping each other.
Yeah. And in most of the stories that I have been privileged to hear and talk to fellow veterans, police officers, and hear the stories, is there's a lot of times this moment where they're on the brink, they're on the edge, they're on the cliff, and somebody, unbeknownst to them at the time, steps in and maybe just takes them and sits by a fire with them for hours and doesn't say a word, but they just know they're there. Or maybe they take them out to do something. It doesn't have to be anything profound. Like those moments, sometimes it's just as simple as, hey man, I'm, lean on my shoulder for a while. And you don't even have to express that sometimes. Like it's really just paying attention. It's really just being able to see, hey, this person's struggling. This is probably what I dislike the most, as we're on a podcast, on a social media, multiple social medias really, is that social media has kind of caused people to become more isolated. And I think that having that face-to-face human connection is a huge key in healing from trauma and healing from brokenness and healing from extremely taxing situations.
Absolutely. And that's why, I'm always a big proponent of, if you have any type of veteran outing, it's a great time to get people like mine might open up. And sometimes they don't, but a lot of times they do. And, again, I really implore everybody, if you're someone who's suffering out there, you're not alone. I just really want people to understand that you're not alone. If you step out of your box, you're going to find people that are like-minded like you. Either they went through something like you or they understood. And one of the things I learned from writing the book from Dr. Michael Maltz is something I want everybody to pay attention to. Tragedies are not competitive. What do I mean by that?
Ooh, man, that's
you was shot and maybe you broke your leg, I don't know, fixing a plane. But that leg issue has affected your life in some way. Just because someone got shot and you got hurt a different way doesn't make their event bigger than yours. I have people walk up to me all the time, and when I do a speaking engagement, Will, I can't think of anything worse than 220 stories falling you. Sure you can. You lost a loved one. You found out you got cancer. You lost your job. The list goes on and on. Tragedies are not competitive. And that's unfortunately a good and bad thing, right? Because in America, we're competitive. We want to be the best. But you have to understand, in an instance like that, what is important, what a tragedy or an incident in someone's life could be as big as the World Trade Center coming on. That's what I tell people. At that moment, whatever's happened to you, it might as well be 220 stories coming down on you. It's what you're going to do with yourself. I decided to fight, and it took a lot for me to get there. I want everybody to understand that at the moment you're having a dark place or something bad's happening, it could be at the end of the month. You just can't pay the bills. What are you going to do with yourself? You're going to figure it out and you're going to move forward. And that's what I want for everybody.
Absolutely, man. I'm not going to steal that. I'm going to give you credit for it, but man, that is a powerful statement, because there are so many people that think that their experiences don't matter because they weren't a Navy SEAL, or they weren't trapped underneath the World Trade Center, or they weren't, in some way, some grandiose, adventure that hurt them, but that's real to you in the moment. I share a story of, I have a little 4-year-old girl upstairs that we have been fostering and are about to adopt. And she came out of a traumatic situation. And in the last 2 years, I've had this little girl in my life, and I love her like she is my own flesh and blood. I see that at 2 years old, she had experienced trauma to the level that other people that have been through much worse in our mind situations, but that was real to her because she was a little 2-year-old girl that didn't have, the protection of a parent that cared, and and we're trying to rebuild that, but it takes time. and it takes love, and it takes care, and it takes giving her hope, and it's all of the things that you talked about earlier, because we are, we in and of ourselves are all broken people in some way, and we learn that through our faith, that, we are broken. We come into this world broken in certain ways, but, the world breaks us even more. And how do we face that? What we're explaining is courage, standing up to those fears, to that adversity in our lives, and saying, I'm going to press on, because by the grace of God, by the community that I have, I am going to press on, and I'm not going to give up, and I'm not going to just tap out like you thought about doing before you had that profound vision underneath those towers. You were saying, I'm tired. I don't know if I can make it. And then God showed himself in an amazing way and gave you the courage to say, hey, no, I'm gonna at least, if I'm gonna fall down and die, I'm gonna fall down moving forward. And I think that's the courage that we all need to have, for sure.
Yeah,
So,
it could be just a daily grind of work. I mean, people, it could be a plumber and you're supporting your family and you're just working like a dog, and so it doesn't have to be the extreme what people think. I just want people to understand we're beings, and like you said, we're not perfect. We're broken in many ways, but understand you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family to live a good life.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit before I let you go. Are we good on time? Are you still good on time? Yeah. Okay. All right. I hadn't intended on going this long, but man, this has been really good and honestly inspiring for myself. And I hope that everybody watching out there is inspired by this too. But let's talk about legacy. What does Will want his legacy to be? Because you were given an amazing gift, and truly believe that even God probably guided those rescuers to your position so that you could, maybe touch a life here tonight, 24 years later, and maybe touch a life on somebody that is struggling with something in their life with your story of courage against adversity. But what is your message for, and what legacy do you want to leave for those that follow you, for your family and your community?
It's a great question. I've always said that if the only thing I want to be remembered for is to being a good father, a good husband, my legacy is my two girls. I'm very proud of them both. I mean, if someone says, hey, well, what do you want to be remembered as? It's just a person who cared about other people and try to make a positive impact in people. Thousands of people die every day. I just want to be remembered that somehow, some way down the line, someone says, oh, you remember that guy, Will Jimeno? Oh, yeah, what he said helped me one day. And that's all I want to do, just like a police officer. When I wear that uniform, I wanted to make a difference in people's lives. So if there's a legacy, it's most importantly to my girls, that they had a good father, was good to their mother. And if someone wants to remember me as being a police officer, I was a very fortunate police officer that was able to withstand a horrible event, but that I walked among heroes, because we lost 37 Port Authority police officers that day, the most in law enforcement history, in one day. Our department unfortunately took such a toll that my legacy again will be for my children, and that I represented my department and those that we lost that day in an honorable way. That would be it.
That's awesome. And that's an awesome goal. And I think really honestly, Will, you've already done that. That's not in question at this point. You have well lived that legacy of the gift that you were given of a longer life. And that's an incredible thing. And what would be your advice for first responders today? We've got a lot of young officers and firefighters coming up. It's incredible with all of the negative movements against the police over the last 5-6 years. Very, very, it's very, very disheartening for me, as I have a very close relationship with military and police, and spend a lot of time in those communities. I'm a part of that community. But there's a lot of young guys coming up, and I mean, a lot of the police officers that are coming in very young out of high school or a couple of years in college, they don't even know 9/11. They didn't experience it. They didn't see it. I mean, my wife is a school teacher, and she always talks when 9/11 rolls around. She's like, it's so crazy, because she was in school and they showed it on TV at her school when it happened on that Tuesday. But what is the thing that you would give for these young men coming up that may have not faced this kind of thing, and how do you deal with trials and dangers, and in your experience, what would you give advice to these young men and women who are coming into these roles and may not understand?
Well, what I would tell them is, and what I tell my academy when I go speak at them, I'm blessed that my police department brings me back to speak to them about survival. But the most important thing is, do it because you want to do it. Do it because you love it. Don't do it before a paycheck. Don't do it for any other reason that you really want to make a difference. And understand, especially law enforcement, today's society is one that we are not looked upon in a favorable way unless they need your help. It's a very tough position, but at the same time, it's an honorable one, and one that people need. Because I tell people, if it's your mother, your father, your grandmother, and they need a police officer, you're going to want a cop that's going to go there and put their lives on the line to make sure your family's there safe.
Yeah.
And I'm inspired, to be honest with you. When I go to the gun range, I meet young kids that somehow, some way know me. And they're like, "Sir, I just want to let you know I'm going to be a cop." Yeah. So at the same time, I'm also inspired because there's so many young men and women who do want to become, and I'm talking specifically law enforcement, in a environment that has been made toxic by certain, by people. And don't get me wrong, we're not perfect. Cops make mistakes, but we go back to the beginning of time. Let's just start with parents. There's parents who shouldn't be parents. So in every line of work, there's bad apples. But the majority of law enforcement officers are good people who are putting their lives on the line to make your community safe so you can live in a good place. So you have to look at it that way. And if you're going to become a cop, understand you're doing it because you want to do it, and understand there's a day that you might not be able to go home because you could lose your life. But at the same time, what I think is rewarding is that every single day you have the opportunity to impact so many people's lives in a positive way, and as much as especially social media right now, I think about this sometimes. I wonder, in the 70s, did we lose as many cops as we're losing today? Perhaps we just didn't know, right? We didn't have the networking, the information we have today. It takes a toll on me seeing how many cops every year get shot, killed, hit by cars, whatever, how many police officers we lose. It's tough. But at the same time, we realize we need law and order. If we don't have it, it would be total chaos. And God bless all those warriors out there every day going to work, doing their shifts, no matter what it means, to make sure that their community is safe. We need you. We love you. But understand, if you're stepping into this role, your heart has to be there. Because if your heart's not there, then you're not going to be a good cop. And that's what leads to bad things, but we need you. And that's the advice I would say is, do it because you truly love it.
Yeah. That is very, very true. And, you can find bad apples in any career field. We have bad apples. I currently am an engineer at an automotive plant as my day job. And it's like, there's bad apples everywhere, guys. So, but I completely agree with you. Most people, they go into the law enforcement, firefighting. They aren't doing it because they're making a giant amount of money. A lot of them, and I would say the vast majority of them,
absolutely,
in my own experience, are people that generally want to be that person that stands in the gap, that runs towards the gunfire, that runs towards the collapsing buildings, and doesn't shy away from that, even though they're scared. Fear is a real thing. It's what you do after you face fear that matters. It's not the fear itself. And man, it just proven that just greatly. So as we start to wrap up here, I wanted to give you an opportunity. What do you want? And this is kind of broadening out, similar to the last question, but what's the one thing that you want every American to remember, not just about 9/11, Well, let's start there. Let's actually let's say this in two parts. How do you want Americans to remember 9/11 and give it honor? Because as I just said, a lot of these new generations didn't experience it. A lot of these kids that are getting out of high school, they didn't experience it. They didn't watch that on TV. They didn't experience a building falling on them. But about what it means to stand up in the gap for others. So let's say just about 9/11, how do you want people to remember 9/11? And then how do you want people to know what it means to stand in the gap for others in the face of evil and danger?
All right. Well, for 9/11, what I want people to remember today is the good of that day, not the bad. Don't think about the cowards. Don't think about the death. Think about how people, put their lives on the line for each other. Not only law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, doctors, but common people, just like your parents, like your brothers and your sisters, how Americans were brave that day, how human beings were good to each other that day. That's what I want people to understand. And I want people to remember that we have to learn all our American history. We can't cookie cut it. All the good, the bad. I grew up and I was inspired by the shows of brave Americans from Vietnam, the Korean War, World War II, showing what it meant to protect freedom. And I want everybody to understand freedom is not free. A lot of our Americans' kids are blessed to live in a bubble. Me, I was in the military. I got to see 11 countries. I got to see third world countries where these people would give their right arm to be an American citizen, to live in our country. They might not have that opportunity. What we have here, we need to protect, and understand that there's only a small percentage of Americans that serve in the military. You're protected by 1%, 2%, maybe 3% of our society. Your freedoms, you cannot take for granted. I always say that's why I have an offense to people that kneel to the flag. You have that right, but understand that flag is not made out of cloth. It is made out of blood of patriots, many of which were your family members from different backgrounds, different color skins, different ethnicities. So understand that what they were attacking us on 9/11 was our freedoms and our way of life. And I want you to remember all the good that day, because there was a lot of good people. And as far as standing in the gap and going forward, understand that you don't have to be the toughest guy. You don't have to be Rambo or Arnold Schwarzenegger. You have to be just a caring individual. I mean, it's simple. If your family's in danger, what are you going to do? You're not going to run the other way. You're going to step forward. You want to do something. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go get yourself killed. But if you see a bad incident, instead of filming it with your phone, you call 911.
Amen.
The right thing. If you can help and you can do it safely, you do it. If you're a police officer, firefighter, that's what we chose. So we have to run toward that, because those people that are in need are depending on us. And again, I always tell people, if you take the job as a police officer, a police officer or a firefighter, EMT, you chose that, and there are people relying on you. When someone dials 911, you expect someone to come, and that's us. We are the people that chose those professions, and people depending on us, and we're the difference in people's lives. And I can only tell you that being able to impact somebody in a positive way where they can go be home with their families is a gift that no amount of money in the world could ever give you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've used this analogy, and this is not my own personal analogy, but something that was said about the spirit of America and what it really means.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even necessarily 9/11. It was 9/12. When we woke up on 9/12, we were not Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives. We weren't blacks, whites, Latinos. We were Americans.
Exactly.
We were united. And that was probably the moment in my life where I can remember back to people put their spears for each other to the side for a little while. And we united, and we're Americans.
Yeah.
And this is what we do, and this is how we fight. And you may give us a black eye, but we're going to come back. And that's resiliency. That's the American spirit. And it's a beautiful thing.
And it's something that we need to share. And I'll say this, that, again, being an immigrant, I learned about all the wars. We are not teaching our children about 9/11 because people have an agenda. I don't know if you know this, but there's only 14 states out of 50 that teach 9/11. So if you want to destroy the American fabric, it's education. And
Yeah.
I don't understand why you don't want to teach about 9/11, because, it might be, oh, well, people have something against the Muslims. No, facts are facts, and people have to understand. Again, there's bad eggs and everything. There's good Muslims, bad Americans, good Americans. But on that day, it's something that needs to be shared and taught to children from all over the world, so something like that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Yep. That's absolutely true. And man, brother, it's been amazing to have you on tonight. This has been a great conversation. I'm just excited because you see and you hear stories like yours, and it should be inspiring. It should be something that we allow ourselves to be proud of what our fellow Americans are capable of, and what true courageous men and women running into danger and even death, what that picture looks like, and how we should actually be more ready to stand in the gap. So I appreciate everything you've done, everything that you've sacrificed, and everything you've went through, because man, you're a brother. Even though this is the first time that I've met you, I feel that you're my brother, and I know you've got my back, you've got America's back, and that's awesome.
And like I said, if people want, they can look up the book Sunrise to the Darkness.
Yep.
On Amazon, but also have a children's book, Immigrant American Survivor. If you want to teach about 9/11, teach them about just life stories and to love America, you can look up both books, Will Jimeno, Jimeno on Amazon. But if you pick up the books, especially Sunrise to the Darkness, if it's able to help you or someone you love, please leave something good on there, because I'm not about selling books. I'm about helping people. And, when another veteran or another person in a dark place can read a review and say, hey, this helped me because of this, that's the way we help each other. Because, again, we're only on this earth so long. So as many people as you can touch in a positive way, that's what we can do.
Yep. Well, thank you. And thank you for everybody that's been here tonight. This is kind of a different layout. Normally we have a chapter 2 and chapter 3 of this, but I didn't want to shortchange Will from being able to tell his story and be able to inspire some people. So we're gonna call it a night with that. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and be ready to stand in the gap for your fellow Americans. We'll be back here tomorrow with another episode with kind of more normal programming. Until then, God bless America, and God bless each and every one of you.
God bless. Take care.